The sound of pens scribbling and paper rustling filled the math classroom at Westbrook High School. The clock on the wall pointed to 9:15 as the classroom door creaked open. Elliot Gray, a 13-year-old boy with tired eyes and a backpack clutched tightly to his chest, stepped inside. Late again, Elliot, came the cold voice of Eleanor Hartman, slicing through the air like a knife. She was a veteran math teacher, infamous for her strictness and absolute authority in the classroom. Elliot lowered his head, breathing heavily. I'm sorry, ma'am, but today I'd like to stand during class. A soft laugh rose from the back of the room. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. No, you'll sit down immediately just like everyone else. Elliot shook his head slightly. I can't, my back. What? Eleanor's voice rose, laced with sarcasm. Yesterday it was family issues. Today it's my back hurts. Can't you come up with something more creative? He gripped his backpack tightly, his lips trembling. The marks on his back, remnants of the time Eleanor struck him with a wooden ruler for not sitting up straight, still burned. I can't sit, Elliot said quietly but firmly. The room fell silent. Eleanor stood up from her desk and walked to the board. Then you must be very talented to defy classroom rules, she said with a cold smile. She erased the simple algebra problem on the board and replaced it with a complex equation filled with integrals and derivatives. This problem is for senior-level advanced students, she announced, her tone daring. If you want to stand, you'll have to solve it. 5 minutes. If not, you're going to the principal's office. Elliot looked up at the board. His heart pounded, sweat forming on his palms. But then, among the tangled symbols, something familiar appeared. He had seen a similar problem 3 weeks ago in a book at the town library. Twice a week, while his classmates lost themselves in video games, Elliot quietly went to the public library. He didn't go to read comics but to study math, a world he explored on his own through old books and free videos online. You're back again? Mrs. Matilda, the elderly librarian, would often ask with a fond smile as he made his way to the reference section. Elliot stepped forward. He picked up a piece of chalk, his hand trembling slightly. The class held its breath. Zach, a boy who often teased him, snickered from the back row. What kind of joke is this? But Elliot didn't stop. He wrote. 1 line, then 2. Each step was laid out clearly, logically. With every symbol he added, his hand grew steadier, his eyes brighter. The laughter faded. The silence in the room was no longer mocking, it was astonished. 3 minutes later, Elliot underlined the answer twice, set the chalk down, and turned to face the class. Eleanor approached the board, her eyes sharp as blades. She examined each step carefully, her brows furrowing, then suddenly lifting. Where did you copy this from? She asked harshly. Nowhere, Elliot replied quietly. I solved it myself. Impossible. You've never been able to do a single algebra problem in my class. Elliot clutched his backpack tighter, his voice steadier now. It's not that I didn't understand. I was just too afraid to show it. Eleanor suddenly shouted, enraged. Silence. Are you being disrespectful to your teacher? She tore his work in half and threw it to the floor. Principal's office. Now. And you'll be suspended. Elliot bowed his head and walked out of the classroom. Behind him, his classmates stared, no longer with mockery but with astonishment. Someone whispered. What if he really did solve it? But Eleanor had already turned away in silence, saying nothing more. The door to the principal's office shut behind Elliot Gray with a heavy clack. He sat down on the worn wooden chair just outside, its faded cushion pressing into his back. His eyes quietly studied the floor, but his ears stayed fixed on the voices drifting from the room next door. I've been teaching for nearly 30 years, Mr. Walsh, came the sharp, blade-like voice of Eleanor Hartman. I know when a child cannot solve a problem like that. Not a student from my class. Not that boy. This is either cheating or some kind of joke. Elliot gripped the strap of his backpack resting on his lap. Inside were notebooks filled with handwritten formulas written during late nights under the dim light of a phone screen so he wouldn't disturb his sleeping sister. He knew what was coming. Ms. Hartman never forgave disobedience, especially not when it happened in public. And this time, he hadn't just defied her, he'd silenced the entire class with nothing but chalk. The door creaked open. A tall man with salt and pepper hair and a weathered but thoughtful face stepped out. Come in, Elliot. Principal Adrian Walsh. A man known for his fairness and his distance. Elliot had never spoken to him one-on-one. Until now. Inside the office, Ms. Hartman sat upright, arms crossed as if on trial. Her eyes fixed on Elliot like a hawk studying fragile prey. Sit down, Principal Walsh said, pointing to the chair across from him. A small cushion had been placed behind it. Elliot blinked in surprise. No one at this school knew his back hurt, or so he thought. He sat down carefully, shifting his weight to avoid pressure on the sore spot. Ms. Hartman has already explained what happened this morning, the principal began, fingers interlaced on the desk. Now, I'd like to hear your side. Elliot glanced at Ms. Hartman. She said nothing, only narrowed her eyes slightly like a predator waiting for a slip. He took a deep breath. Sir, this morning. I was late, and my back was hurting. I didn't want to sit because it was really painful. What happened to your back? Mr. Walsh asked, eyes steady on Elliot's face. Elliot paused. The question was like a knife, not because it was sharp, but because it forced a choice, tell the truth or stay silent. He looked down at his worn-out shoes. I slipped on the stairs over the weekend, he murmured. A beat of silence. Ms. Hartman smirked slightly. I could have predicted that. The excuses just keep sprouting like weeds. And the math problem? Mr. Walsh asked, still calm. Did you really solve it yourself? Yes, sir, Elliot answered, looking up for the first time. I taught myself. At the town library. I can solve another one now if you want to test me. Ms. Hartman let out a short, cutting laugh. He self-taught himself advanced integration? Who's supposed to believe that? He probably memorized a solution from one of those thousands of YouTube videos. I won't make judgments based on assumptions, Principal Walsh said, his voice firm. We'll arrange a private exam. You'll take a test with problems at multiple levels under strict supervision. Elliot nodded slowly. Part of him was afraid, but another part was ready. The math wasn't scary. What was scary was that no one believed him. Just as the principal reached for a folder to write the test confirmation, a knock came at the door. Excuse me, a gentle female voice called. I heard Elliot was here. The door opened and Ms. Clara Bennett stepped in. The youngest teacher at the school, she stood out with her short copper-colored hair and bright eyes that always seemed to be searching for wonder in her students. I hope I'm not interrupting, she said, her eyes full of concern as they met Elliot's. Ms. Bennett. Mr. Walsh looked surprised. There's something I'd like to share regarding Elliot, she replied. This is a matter for the math department, Ms. Hartman cut in, her tone biting. We're dealing with a serious issue here, not science fair fun. Clara kept her voice calm but firm. That's exactly why I'm here. Because this is serious. She turned to the principal. Last year, Elliot participated in the town's science fair. His project was about modeling plant growth using simple differential equations and the Fibonacci sequence. I had to check it 3 times because I couldn't believe an 8th grader had written it. Elliot lowered his head, face flushed. I didn't want anyone to know, he muttered. I just like doing it. Clara smiled softly. Elliot has extraordinary mathematical talent, Mr. Walsh. But the strange thing is, he always tries to hide it. The room filled with a long, thoughtful silence. I propose the special test be held tomorrow morning, the principal said at last. Ms. Hartman, you'll prepare the problems, I'll approve them. And I'll supervise personally. I'd like a 3rd teacher present to ensure objectivity, Clara added. Mr. Walsh nodded. Agreed. We'll do this by the book. No one will be treated unfairly, not teachers and not students. Elliot received the confirmation paper and the exam schedule. His hands were still trembling as he took it. But as he stepped out of the office, he knew. Tomorrow wouldn't be a day of running away. It would be the first time he stood his ground. The next morning, a light mist blanketed the sky. The schoolyard at Westbrook High was still quiet as Elliot Gray stepped through the gate, his backpack swaying gently behind him. He had arrived earlier than usual, not because he was asked to, but because the anxiety in his chest had made sleep impossible. In the distance, the main building stood tall, its glass windows reflecting the pale silver light of dawn. The exam would be held in the administrative wing, meeting room number 2, typically used for parent conferences or staff meetings. Standing before the closed door, Elliot took a long breath. Elliot. He turned around. Ms. Clara Bennett was hurrying toward him, her bag in hand, cheeks flushed pink from the cold. You're really early, she said, offering a reassuring smile. Are you okay? I think so, Elliot replied quietly. I just didn't want to be late. Ms. Hartman would use that as an excuse to me. It's all right, she interrupted gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. Today is your day. Just do what you've been doing all year long. You don't have to prove anything except to yourself. The door opened. Principal Adrian Walsh stood inside, nodding at them both. He was dressed as precisely as always, deep blue shirt, striped tie, and a composed, unreadable demeanor. On the table was a sealed envelope, a stack of blank papers, several pencils, and a regulation-approved calculator. Everything had been prepared with exact care, nothing more, nothing less. The room held just one desk and one chair positioned in the center. A soft cushion had already been placed on the seat. We'll begin on time, Mr. Walsh said. Ms. Hartman is waiting outside. Ms. Bennett will supervise the final portion. She's not coming in? Elliot asked. No. To avoid any conflict of interest, the principal replied. I'll be the only one present during the entire test. If you're ready, we can begin. Elliot nodded. He sat down. His back still ached, but this time the pain didn't hold him back. Mr. Walsh unsealed the envelope, pulled out the test papers, and placed them before Elliot. The exam contains questions ranging from grade 8 level to advanced high school mathematics. You have 2 hours. Do as much as you can in order. No one expects you to finish everything, but take it seriously. Elliot flipped to the first page. The opening problem was a basic system of equations. He smirked, almost insulting. He began to write. His hand moved with ease, fluid and unhesitating. Systems of equations, quadratic functions, trigonometry, he moved through them like a machine long awakened. What filled his mind wasn't memorized formulas, but frameworks, concepts, and patterns built over time. 30 minutes passed, and Elliot was nearly through the third page. Mr. Walsh remained still in the corner of the room, watching quietly. Page 4. Integration. Derivatives. Advanced calculus. Elliot paused for a second. Not because it was difficult, but because he was moved. This was the language he had learned alone, wrestled with in silence while the world slept. These numbers were no longer just dry symbols, they were part of him now, like breath. He kept writing. Analyzing, changing variables, checking conditions, drawing conclusions. For several of the harder problems, he even offered 2 different solutions, clearly noting the logic behind each approach. By the 1 hour 15-minute mark, he had finished the entire exam. He looked up. Silence. No laughter. No skepticism. Just the steady tick of the clock and the focused eyes of the principal. I'm done, Elliot said softly. Mr. Walsh approached. He didn't speak at first, simply collected the papers and skimmed through a few pages. His expression remained unreadable. I'll make copies and have the exam reviewed by other teachers, he said. You may return to class. As Elliot reached the door, he paused. If I made a mistake somewhere, that's okay. But I didn't fake it. I know, Mr. Walsh replied quietly. I saw you do it. Out in the hallway, Ms. Bennett was waiting. Her eyes lit up with pride when she saw him. How did it go? I finished earlier than I thought, Elliot replied, and for the first time he smiled. I even had time to write alternate solutions. We'll have the results soon, she said. Elliot nodded. Today he no longer felt like a student who had to hide. Today he had stepped into the light and left his first real voice on the page. The test ended at 10:20 a.m. By noon, rumors had spread through Westbrook like wildfire across a dry field. No one knew exactly what had happened inside the small meeting room in the administrative wing, where Elliot Gray, the quiet, unremarkable student from Class 8B, had been taken for a special test. But everyone had their own version of the story. I heard he finished the advanced exam in under an hour. No way, it was probably just a placement quiz. Ms. Hartman's losing her mind because she couldn't find a single mistake. He solved the trap question she set, then rewrote it 3 different ways. Elliot sat alone in the quiet area near the library, his lunch tray untouched. Students passing by glanced at him. Some once, others twice, even 3 times, as if trying to confirm whether the rumors could possibly be true. But instead of avoiding their eyes, Elliot met them. Not with defiance, but with a quiet stillness. The stillness of someone who no longer had anything to hide. Round pushpin in the cafeteria. When the lunch bell rang, the cafeteria filled quickly. Elliot walked in slowly, stood in line like every other day, tray in hand. But the familiar rhythm had changed. He could feel it. The room was seeing him differently now. The first to approach was Zach Reed, the tall boy who often caused trouble, who had mocked Elliot more than once for his grades and hand-me-down clothes. Zach emerged from the crowd, hands in the pockets of his hoodie, the usual swagger absent. Hey, Elliot, he said quietly, just loud enough for the 2 of them to hear. Elliot turned his head slightly, didn't speak, just gave a small nod, a pause, then a firmer, slower nod. Zach scratched his neck awkwardly. I used to call you Goldfish Brain. I remember. Yeah, I'm sorry. It's okay. Zach stood there for a moment longer, then walked away without another word. It was a small gesture, but to Elliot, it weighed more than all the insults that came before it. Round pushpin in the teacher's office. Across the wall, in the teacher's office, the atmosphere was just as tense. On Principal Adrian Walsh's desk lay 3 copies of Elliot's test. Ms. Hartman sat in the corner, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the paper in front of her like she could pierce through the ink. She had always taken pride in her ability to control the classroom, to categorize students by aptitude. And Elliot, the quiet boy who was often late, who turned in assignments inconsistently, had been, in her mind, the textbook case of chronically average. And now, she was holding a test filled with solutions she could not refute. Not only correct, but original. Not only valid, but well beyond curriculum expectations. Someone must have coached him, she muttered. A 13-year-old can't do this kind of math. Unless, Clara Bennett cut in calmly. He actually understands it. She sat 3 desks away, reviewing the test for a second time. Her eyes held a mix of fascination and pride. I've taught gifted students before, she said. But Elliot has a rare kind of mathematical intuition. He doesn't just solve problems. He knows why the solution works. No one objected. A few teachers nodded quietly. One even whispered, maybe he's some kind of prodigy? Ms. Hartman stood abruptly. We can't reassess an entire student's profile based on one test. We're not reassessing him based on one test. Principal Walsh spoke for the first time, his voice low but clear. We're reassessing how adults react to an unrecognized talent. Silence fell over the room. Round pushpin in the principal's office. That afternoon, Elliot was called to the principal's office. He walked in, standing straight, hands clutched tightly to his backpack straps. A reflex he hadn't yet unlearned. Principal Walsh sat behind his desk, sunlight from the window casting a glow across the duplicated test sheets. Beside him, Ms. Bennett waited, her eyes warm. Hello, Elliot. The principal began. I think you did extremely well. Elliot gave a small nod, silent. Not just correct, exceptional, he continued. I've contacted Westbrook High. They've agreed to let you attend their advanced math class 3 mornings a week. A school bus will pick you up here and bring you back in time for your regular classes. Elliot's eyes widened in disbelief. Really? You deserve it, said Ms. Bennett. This isn't a special favor. It's what should have happened a long time ago. Elliot couldn't find the words. He only nodded again. Slower this time, his eyes shimmering. There's one more thing, the principal added, his expression shifting slightly. We'll be looking into some matters regarding Ms. Hartman's classroom. Elliot didn't ask. He understood. And for the first time, he knew the adults were on his side. Late afternoon. Soft sunlight spilled through the library windows, stretching across the desk where Elliot Gray sat, hands still holding a pen, though his mind had long since drifted from the homework in front of him. Outside, the last students were leaving the school grounds, laughing under the golden, honeyed glow of sunset. The library door creaked open. The elderly librarian, Mrs. Adelaide, didn't even look up as she said, "You've arrived." Elliot looked up. Standing in the doorway was a tall, lean man in a light gray suit, holding a worn canvas bag filled with books. His hair was salt and pepper, his face clean-shaven, and behind thin glasses, his eyes sparkled with life. "Apologies, I'm a bit late," he said, his voice deep and gentle. "I had to finish teaching my linear algebra class before I could get here." Elliot sprang to his feet, a mix of surprise and joy lighting up his face. Dr. Morgan, Dr. Isaac Morgan, a mathematics lecturer at Riverton State University, and the first adult who had ever sat down beside Elliot in a quiet community center 6 months ago. Paperclip 6 months ago. Elliot had been sitting alone in a corner of the room, hunched over, absorbed in solving an integral that didn't appear anywhere in the 8th grade curriculum. Other volunteers were busy tutoring students who had fallen behind. Elliot knew he didn't belong there, but he had nowhere else to study. Then a shadow fell across his page. "You should have changed variables here," a voice said, pointing to a line in his notebook, "instead of forcing it into the original form." Elliot startled and looked up. The stranger sat down. No judgment, no condescension. "What's your take on second derivatives?" he asked. And just like that, an unplanned lesson began. Paperclip, present day. Dr. Morgan placed his bag on the table. Ms. Bennett contacted me, he said. She told me about the test this morning, about the school's reaction, and he smiled. About a boy who made an entire system stop and think. Elliot's cheeks flushed. I just wanted to keep learning. Wanting to learn is a precious thing, Dr. Morgan replied. But I think it's time you start to understand. You're not just a good student. You're something more. Elliot said nothing. I've seen a copy of your exam, he continued. The way you handled the integrals, it's on par with second-year university methods. But it's not memorization. You think, Elliot, and that's something you can't teach. I learned from old books, online videos, a few forums, Elliot murmured. It doesn't matter how you learned, said Morgan. What matters is how you think. He pulled out an envelope. This is a letter of recommendation. I've arranged a trial spot for you in the Rivorton Institute of Applied Mathematics summer program. 6 weeks of advanced study, alongside top students from across the state. Elliot's eyes widened. Me? But I'm only 13. Age isn't the limit. That's just what the system thinks. What about my parents? The tuition. It's fully covered, and I've already spoken with your family through Ms. Bennett. We'll meet this weekend. If you agree. Silence settled between them. Elliot felt his heart pounding in his throat. For years, he had studied in the shadows, quietly, alone. And now a door of light was opening. If I go, he whispered, will I have to leave school? No, this is a summer program. But afterward, if you choose, I can help you accelerate your education. Dr. Morgan stood, his eyes kind but serious. Elliot, it's time you understood something. There are gifts in life that aren't meant to be hidden. Not to boast, but to use, to build, to change things. He turned toward the door. You're not just good at math. You see things other people don't. Elliot looked down at the letter in his hands. His name printed in neat, clear letters. A wave of awe and warmth washed over him. I'll go, he said, almost in a whisper. Dr. Morgan smiled. I knew you would. In the administrative office of Westbrook High School, pale fluorescent light poured down on the long conference table, where Eleanor Hartman sat upright, back straight as a bowstring, hands clasped in front of her. Before her lay an internal summons from the district education office, marked urgent. There was no one else in the room but her, and the slow, ticking clock on the wall. Paperclip, the hearing begins. At exactly 3 p.m., Principal Adrian Walsh entered the room, accompanied by Evelyn Shore, head of human resources and representative of the disciplinary board. Ms. Hartman, said Mr. Walsh, sitting across from her. Thank you for being on time. I see no reason to delay, Hartman replied coldly. Then we'll get straight to it, said Mrs. Shore, placing a thick folder on the table. We've received formal complaints from at least 3 students, 2 teachers, and 1 library staff member regarding your conduct, particularly your treatment of student Elliot Gray. Eleanor didn't blink. I'm a strict teacher. I don't apologize for that. There's being strict, Mrs. Shore replied, flipping to the first page of the file. And then there's abuse of authority. There is documented evidence you deliberately used a test problem far beyond student capacity in an attempt to humiliate. You tore up a correctly solved paper. And according to Ms. Bennett's report, there have been instances of inappropriate physical pressure as part of your disciplinary methods. Eleanor's jaw tightened. He's manipulating everyone, she said through gritted teeth. A child doesn't just self-learn second-order integrals. You're naive if you think no one's feeding him the answers. Mr. Walsh leaned forward slightly. Whether or not someone helped him, that's irrelevant to how you responded when he exceeded expectations. Eleanor slammed the table. I'm not wrong. I've spent nearly 30 years in this profession. I know which students have potential and which don't. Perhaps, said Mrs. Shore sharply. That's precisely the problem. You've come to believe your judgment is infallible. The air in the room thickened. Eleanor said nothing more, but in her eyes there was no remorse. only the quiet pain of someone losing what she thought could never be taken. Authority. Paperclip on campus. A different day. Out in the schoolyard, Elliot sat reading under the shade near the teacher's office. Since the test, not a day had gone by without a student approaching to ask him about math or seek study advice. But today, things were quieter. News had spread that Ms. Hartman was under investigation. Students who had once feared her now whispered about past incidents. One claimed they'd been forced to stand the entire class for forgetting a ruler. Another remembered being made to write on the chalkboard until their hand cramped. Elliot listened quietly, saying nothing. "Do you feel happy?" asked Marissa, a classmate, "that she's finally being held accountable?" He shook his head. "Not happy, just right." Paperclip the family meeting. Later that afternoon, in a small classroom repurposed for a private meeting, Dr. Isaac Morgan sat across from Elliot's parents. Mrs. Gray still wore her nurse's scrubs, faintly smelling of antiseptic. Mr. Gray, a quiet man with calloused hands from construction work, sat with his palms resting on his knees. "You've raised an exceptional boy," Dr. Morgan said, glancing at Elliot, who sat beside him, "and I want to help him get to where his mind belongs." "Will he be safe?" Mrs. Gray asked, her eyes slightly red. "Academically, yes. I'll personally supervise him. Socially, it'll take time. But I think he's already learning how to stand on his own." Mr. Gray nodded slowly. "My boy once told me, math is the only thing that's always right. I didn't get it then, but now, I kind of do." Paperclip principal's office. Final call. Late at night, Principal Walsh sat alone in his office. On one side of the desk lay Eleanor Hartman's unsigned letter of resignation. On the other, a gifted student report with Elliot Gray listed at the top. The phone rang. "Principal Walsh? Ms. Hartman has just submitted a formal request for extended leave. No stated reason." Mr. Walsh closed his eyes for a moment, then stood, folded the documents, and placed them neatly into a drawer. "It's time," he murmured. June in Riverton began with sudden rains and fog-laced mornings. The air was cool and damp, and Riverton State University seemed to wake earlier than usual. For Elliot Gray, age 13, this summer would have no vacation. No video games, no parks, no sound of cicadas. Instead, whiteboards, functions, and college freshmen speaking a language even adults had to slow down to follow. He was the youngest participant in the university's advanced summer mathematics program, not by scholarship, but by the personal endorsement of Dr. Isaac Morgan. Round Pushpin Day 1. Elliot stood outside Lecture Hall 2B, backpack over his shoulder, his palms sweaty from gripping the straps too tightly. Inside were 23 students, most of them 4 to 8 years older than him. They chatted about abstract algebra, group theory, and professors whose names Elliot had never even heard. "What am I doing here? I'm just a kid." The door opened. A student pushed it open and spotted Elliot. "Hey, you lost or something? This is a college class, kid." Elliot pressed his lips together. "No, I'm enrolled in this class." Several heads turned. Some smirked. Some raised eyebrows. No one said anything else. Elliot walked in, chose the seat in the back row. Sat down, eyes forward, trying not to show that his hands were still shaking. Round pushpin Dr. Vargas. The instructor that day wasn't Dr. Morgan. It was Dr. Alejandra Vargas, a Spanish-American woman in her 40s with a sleek ponytail and X-ray eyes that seemed to see through everything. She scanned the room, paused briefly on Elliot. No expression. Just a nod. "I'm Vargas. Welcome to Module 1, Formal Logic and Advanced Set Theory. No small talk. No jokes." She walked to the board and wrote. "For all x is an element of, there exists epsilon 0, fx, l, epsilon fx equals l." Then turned around and said briskly, "Who here has never studied epsilon delta limits? Hands up." A few students raised their hands hesitantly. Elliot didn't. He had already studied it in library corners late at night while the world slept. Good. Today's lecture builds on that. First question, can anyone prove the limit of a nonlinear function at an arbitrary point using epsilon delta without referencing a textbook? Silence. Dr. Vargas crossed her arms. No one? In that case, Elliot, right? Elliot flinched. Yes, ma'am. I hear you're a special case. Here's your chance to prove it. Elliot stood, hands trembling. A student snorted quietly. He walked to the board. The marker felt cold in his hand. His mind went blank, and then, like a dam breaking, the symbols rushed in. Slowly. In order. He wrote. Explained. Used epsilon and delta correctly. Dr. Vargas's gaze sharpened as she followed his logic. 1 minute. 2. 3. When he finished, the room was still. Vargas stepped closer, reading each line carefully. No one laughed. No one whispered. Correct, she said coolly. Cleaner than the textbook version I used last year. Elliot returned to his seat. His back was soaked with sweat. But his hands no longer shook. Round pushpin after class. When the class ended, a tall male student named Armin approached. He wore round glasses, a fully buttoned shirt, and spoke with a soft Indian accent. How did you learn that stuff? Online? Did someone tutor you? No one, Elliot replied. I just read a lot. Armin studied him for a few seconds, then nodded. Impressive. First time a 13-year-old made me feel lazy. Elliot smiled. The first smile of the day. Round pushpin on the drive home. Elliot didn't stay in the dorms his parents drove him to and from campus daily. On the way home that day, he didn't say much. Just stared out the window, watching trees pass like data streams across the surface of his mind. How was your first day? His mother asked. Hard and strange, he replied. But not as scary as I thought. Round pushpin, a different space. While the other students sometimes gathered at the cafe beside the library after lectures, Elliot usually slipped away unnoticed. He didn't feel excluded, but he didn't belong either. Age was a barrier. But silence was the real distance. In the classroom filled with Greek letters and integral signs, laughter would occasionally break out over inside jokes about math that Elliot wasn't experienced enough to understand. Discussions about college textbooks, about Professor X back in freshman year, made him feel like he was watching a play with no lines written for him. I know how to solve problems, but I don't know how to make friends. Round pushpin Arlo. On Monday morning, as Elliot sat alone in the library corner, hunched over a rereading of the Cantor-Bernstein proof, a shadow fell across his book. You're using the old German translation? Elliot looked up. A tall, lean guy with warm brown skin and messy curls under a beanie was glancing down at the page. I'm Arlo. Arlo Lynn, he said, offering a hand. Elliot, he replied, shaking it, a bit awkwardly. You're actually reading the original Schroeder-Bernstein proof in German? The English translation was too cluttered for me. Arlo laughed. If Vargas heard that, she'd probably explode. Mind if I sit? Elliot nodded. From that moment, like a door unlocking, everything began to shift. Round pushpins solving together, laughing together. Arlo was a sophomore math major, quick-witted, slightly impulsive. Unlike Elliot's cautious quiet, Arlo was outgoing, careless with notes, but had a razor-sharp mathematical intuition. You solved it that way? And I thought I had to use an inverse. No. Look at this expression here. Define gx. Like this. Oh. That's so geometric. I was stuck in linear thinking. They worked like they'd been partners for a year. They didn't need many words. Just a glance, a scribble, or a tiny symbol, and they understood each other. Elliot began laughing more. Arlo stopped teasing him about being a kid, and instead began pulling him into bigger conversations about math competitions, renowned professors, and even, ever heard of the National Youth Mathematics Conference? No, they host it every year, for high schoolers and undergrad freshmen. Most attendees are juniors or older. I submitted a few problems last week and got invited, but I'm too lazy to go. He leaned in, lowering his voice like it was a secret. You should send something in. Me? Elliot frowned. I'm only in 8th grade. All the more reason. You think differently, not stuck in textbook methods. Your work has soul. Round pushpin the invitation. 3 days later, under Arlo's gentle but persistent encouragement, Elliot submitted a PDF of his write-up, an intuitive approach to unconstrained optimization using geometric reasoning instead of traditional calculus. He didn't expect much. He thought of it as just an exercise. A week later, the reply email appeared in Elliot's inbox just as class ended and he was waiting for his dad to pick him up. Congratulations, Elliot Gray. Your paper has been selected for presentation at the 12th Annual National Youth Mathematics Conference in Chicago. We were highly impressed by your non-traditional approach and unique geometric reasoning. Elliot froze. He didn't process it immediately. Not until Arlo screamed across the campus lawn, "Oh my God! You actually got invited!" Only then did it become real. The 12th National Youth Mathematics Conference was held in Chicago, within the marbled halls of the National Institute of Science and Mathematics. A black plaque with silver letters engraved a solemn message, "Where young minds meet infinite possibility." Elliot Gray stood just off the main auditorium, a plastic name badge hanging around his neck. Elliot Gray, presenter. He was 13 years old, the youngest among hundreds of attendees, the only one not wearing a blazer, just a carefully ironed pale blue shirt his mother pressed the night before, dark khaki pants, and worn-out sneakers. Inside, attendees were taking their seats. Elite high school students, first-year undergrads from top universities, teachers, parents, academic journalists. They spoke in a fluent language, the language of people who knew they belonged. Elliot wasn't sure if he did. He looked at his hands. They trembled slightly. Arlo, his new friend, had texted the night before, "Just be you. Don't try to prove anything. Everything you need is already in your head." But today Arlo wasn't there. Elliot was truly alone. His presentation was fourth in the morning session. Geometric Intuition in Derivative-Free Optimization, a middle school perspective. The title itself made him cringe. When he submitted it, he thought it was funny. Now, it sounded like he was pretending to be someone he wasn't. They called his name over the microphone, flatly, without fanfare. He stood. Each step echoed on the wooden stage floor like the beating of his heart. The stage was small. Behind him, the projection screen. In front of him, over 100 pairs of eyes. Standing at the mic, Elliot suddenly realized the scariest part wasn't the lights. It was the silence. No murmurs. No phones. No one pretending to look away. Everyone was waiting. Waiting for a 13-year-old to explain something that sounded like a PhD thesis. He took a breath. Tried to start. His voice came out soft, slightly hoarse. One hand still gripping the clicker. "My name is Elliot Gray. I'm in 8th grade at Westbrook Middle School. Today, I want to share a different view on solving unconstrained optimization problems without derivatives." A few brows lifted. Pens paused mid-note. He continued, steadier now. "I first learned about optimization from a fencing problem in a 7th grade textbook. But instead of using derivatives like my teacher showed us, I tried imagining the problem as a shape, something I could press or stretch. I thought of it like cloth. And if I could see how the shape changed, maybe I could find the optimal point through geometry." More eyes turned toward the screen. Elliot advanced the slide. It showed two intersecting curves, with color-coded zones representing what he called spatial pressure. He'd built the visuals himself using dynamic geometry software. Instead of finding where the derivative is zero, I guessed that if a shape is being pressed from all directions, the spot that doesn't move, that's the extremum. It sounded silly on paper, but as he pointed to the image and described the imagined forces, which he called symmetry-shaping forces, the silence in the room shifted. Not skeptical, attentive. A professor in the front row leaned forward, chin resting on his hand. Elliot kept going. The more he spoke, the clearer his voice, the steadier his hand. He drew a simple curve with the laser pointer, explained each region, why intuition might help students find extrema even before they learn formal calculus. "I know this method isn't theoretically precise, but it helped me find correct answers. And for students like me in middle school, it feels like a bridge from feeling to understanding." When Elliot finished, no one clapped at first. There was a pause, a breath held in collective thought. Then, the professor stood and began to applaud. Applause followed. Long, thoughtful applause. Not explosive, but full of recognition. A woman raised her hand. "I'm Dr. Ray Sanders from the University of Michigan. Elliot, do you think your method could evolve into a framework for building geometric intuition in students who haven't learned calculus yet?" Elliot blinked. I never thought about that, but I'm willing to try. A student in the middle row stood up. Do you have a blog or maybe a GitHub with these models? Elliot flushed. Not yet, but I'll look into it. More applause. Louder this time. Elliot bowed his head, walked off stage. His heart raced, but this time with joy. He had just told his story, in the only language he had ever truly mastered, mathematics. That evening, returning to the hotel with his parents, who had sat quietly through the entire session without him even knowing, Elliot opened his phone and found 3 interview requests from youth math publications, 1 invitation to speak at a student TEDx conference, and 1 email from the National Institute of Mathematics. Elliot, if you're interested in building a middle school math program based on your intuition model, we would like to support you. He didn't know how to respond, but when his mother gently placed a hand on his shoulder, her voice trembling with pride, "You're not the boy standing in the back of the class anymore," Elliot whispered. "I'm still me. I think they're just finally listening." 3 weeks after the conference, Elliot Gray sat at his small wooden desk by the bedroom window. Outside, late summer leaves had begun to turn on the old oak trees near their apartment. But in his hands wasn't a math problem, nor a draft of his TEDx speech. It was a letter, stamped by Westbrook Middle School, labeled, "To Elliot Gray, Confidential." Round pushpin the strange letter. Elliot stared at the envelope for over 2 minutes. His heart wasn't pounding like it had been in Chicago, but there was a pinprick feeling under his sternum. Not fear, just hesitation. His mother stepped in, noticing he hadn't opened it yet. "You're not curious?" "I am," Elliot said. "I'm just not sure I want to know what they'll say." Eventually he opened it, slowly, carefully, like unsealing something from a past he had once tried to bury. Round pushpin the letter reads, "Dear Elliot Gray, I write not just as the principal of Westbrook Middle School, but as an adult who was not fast enough to recognize what was right. On behalf of the administration and faculty, I sincerely apologize for what you experienced at our school, the doubt, the unfair treatment, and, most of all, the failure to recognize both your talent and your dignity. The incident with Ms. Eleanor Hartman has been fully investigated. As you know, she has resigned, but that does not absolve us of our collective responsibility. You should never have had to prove your worth by enduring hardship. The system should have found you, not waited for you to scream in silence. I know an apology cannot rewrite the past, but I hope it can be part of healing. Westbrook has decided to name our newly renovated math classroom the Gray Room, a reminder of your story and a commitment. There will be no second Elliot left unseen. We would also like to invite you back, if you're willing, to speak at our opening ceremony this fall, not to boast, but to share your journey and inspire those whose gifts may still be hidden. Again, we are sorry, and thank you, not just for persevering, but for making it impossible for us to keep looking away. Sincerely, Adrian Walsh, Principal. Round pushpin reaction. Elliot put the letter down. His eyes blinked slowly. "What is it?" his mother asked. He didn't answer, just handed her the letter. She read it from top to bottom, then looked at him. "They apologized." "I don't hate them," Elliot said quietly. "I just didn't think they would." His mother sat beside him. "You don't have to forgive them today, but forgiveness is a gift you give, not because they deserve it, but because you are already moving forward." Round pushpin later that night. Elliot wrote a short reply, brief but honest. "Dear Mr. Walsh, thank you for your letter. I didn't know if anyone would ever truly see me. I'll attend the opening ceremony, not to talk about what I've done, but to speak to students like me. Keep learning even if no one believes you can. Sincerely, Elliot Gray." Round pushpin the Gray Room. 2 weeks later, on a cool early fall morning, Elliot returned to Westbrook Middle School for the first time since walking out silently after his confrontation with Ms. Hartman. Everything looked smaller than he remembered. The hallways, the brick walls, the stone bench outside. But he had grown. Not just in time, But in truth, the new math room was at the end of the second-floor hallway. A small brass sign on the door read, "The Gray Room, honoring resilience and unseen potential." Ms. Clara Bennett welcomed Elliot with a radiant smile. After the principal's short remarks, Elliot was invited to speak. No stage, no spotlight, just a 13-year-old boy standing in front of 200 students, many of whom had once ignored him, mocked him, or simply never asked. He took the mic. His voice trembled at first, then steadied. "I used to be a student at this school. Some people thought I wasn't smart. Some never asked what I liked or was good at. But honestly, I didn't say anything either. I thought if I stayed quiet, no one would notice when I made mistakes. But then I realized, if I never spoke up, no one would see the best parts of me either." He paused, looked around. Many eyes were on him. A few teachers nodded. Zach, the boy who once mocked him, sat silently in the front row, watching with wide eyes. If you're sitting here thinking no one gets you, I want to say this: you don't need to be loud to be heard. You just need to not give up. Because eventually, someone will see you. He bowed. No thunderous applause, but something in the room lifted, like a weight gently being set down. Something real, something light, something true. 3 weeks after the Chicago conference, Elliot Gray sat at his small wooden desk by the bedroom window. Outside, summer was fading. The leaves on the old oak trees around their worn-down apartment had started to turn. But in Elliot's hands wasn't a math problem. And it wasn't the draft of his upcoming TEDx talk, either. It was a letter, stamped with the seal of Westbrook Middle School, and printed across the top of the envelope. To Elliot Gray, confidential. Round pushpin the strange letter. Elliot stared at the envelope for over 2 minutes. His heart didn't race the way it had on the stage in Chicago, but there was something sharp beneath his ribs, like a tiny pin pressing at his sternum. Not fear, just hesitation. His mother stepped in, noticing he hadn't opened it yet. "You're not curious?" she asked. "I am," Elliot replied. "I'm just not sure what I want to hear from them." Eventually, he opened it. Slowly, carefully, as if unsealing a message from a past he'd once tried to bury. Round pushpin the letter. "Dear Elliot Gray, I write this not only as the principal of Westbrook Middle School, but as an adult who was not quick enough to recognize what was right. On behalf of the administration and faculty, I offer a sincere apology for what you experienced at our school. The doubt, the unfair treatment, and, most of all, the way your talent and character were overlooked. The matter involving you and Ms. Eleanor Hartman has been fully investigated. As you know, she has resigned. But that does not absolve us of collective responsibility. You should never have had to prove your worth through suffering. The system should have found you, not waited for you to scream into silence. I know an apology cannot undo the past, but I hope it can be part of the healing. Westbrook has decided to name our newly renovated math classroom the Gray Room, as a reminder of your story, and as a promise. There will be no second Elliot left unseen. We also invite you to return, if you're willing, to speak at the upcoming school year's opening ceremony. Not to boast, but to share your journey and inspire the students who may be carrying unseen gifts of their own. Once again, we are sorry. And thank you, not just for enduring, but for making it impossible for us to keep looking away. Sincerely, Adrian Walsh, Principal. Round pushpin reaction. Elliot set the letter down. His eyes blinked slowly. "What is it?" his mother asked. He said nothing, just handed her the letter. She read it start to finish, then looked at him. "They apologized." "I don't hate them," Elliot said quietly. "I just didn't think they would." She sat beside him. "You don't have to forgive them today, but forgiveness is a gift you give, not because they deserve it, but because you've already moved on." Round pushpin afterward. That evening, Elliot wrote a reply short, but sincere. "Dear Principal Walsh, thank you for your letter. I too once wasn't sure anyone would ever really see me. I'll attend the opening ceremony, not to talk about what I've done, but to speak to students like me. Keep learning even if no one believes you can. Sincerely, Elliot Gray. Round Pushpin, the Gray Room. 2 weeks later, on an early autumn morning, Elliot walked once more onto the campus of Westbrook Middle School. For the first time since the quiet, painful day he left. After the confrontation with Ms. Hartman, everything looked smaller than he remembered. The hallways, the walls, the stone bench outside. But he had grown, not just in height, but in who he had become. The new math classroom sat at the far end of the second-floor corridor. A small brass plaque on the door read, "The Gray Room, honoring resilience and overlooked potential." Miss Clara Bennett greeted him with a bright, beaming smile. After brief opening remarks from the principal, Elliot was invited to speak. No stage, no spotlight, just a 13-year-old boy standing before 200 students, many of whom once ignored him, mocked him, or never asked who he was. He held the mic. His voice shook slightly, then steadied. "I used to be a student here. Some people thought I wasn't smart. Some never asked what I liked or what I was good at. But honestly, I didn't speak up either. I thought if I stayed quiet, no one would notice my mistakes. But then I realized, if I didn't speak up, no one would see the best parts of me either." He paused, looked around. Many eyes were focused. A few teachers nodded. Zach, the boy who once taunted him, sat in the front row, silent, unmoving. "If you're sitting here thinking no one understands you, I want to tell you this. You don't have to stand out to be heard. You just have to not give up. Because eventually someone will see you." He bowed. There was no thunderous applause like at the Chicago conference. But in the air, something had been lifted. Something unspoken. Something true. Not loud, but real. And finally, heard. Wednesday afternoon, a light rain tapped gently against the window, each drop beating like the rhythm of a quiet song. Elliot Gray sat in the library of Westbrook Middle School, now a place he often returned to, working on advanced assignments from his high school math enrichment program and preparing mathematical presentations for the student community. His hand moved lightly across the paper, sketching the curves of a nonlinear optimization problem. He didn't notice when Ms. Clara Bennett, the new math teacher, approached. She quietly placed an envelope on the table, sealed with a deep blue wax stamp. "Someone sent this for you from abroad," she smiled. "And the principal wanted you to receive it personally." Elliot looked up. The envelope was from the Euler International Institute of Mathematics, headquartered in Switzerland. His heart skipped a beat. He tore it open. Inside was a handwritten letter in English, printed on paper bearing the Institute's emblem, a golden compass over a Fibonacci spiral. "Dear Mr. Gray, your recent work as presented at the National Youth Mathematics Symposium in Chicago has reached our review committee through both academic channels and direct recommendation from several university-level mentors. We are pleased to invite you as one of only 24 students worldwide to participate in our Junior Mathematical Research Residency, JMARR, a 4-week residential program held this summer at the Euler Institute, focusing on collaborative mathematical exploration among young talents aged 13 to 17. The program is fully funded, including travel, lodging, and meals. Mentors will include university professors, research mathematicians, and former Olympiad medalists. We believe your unique perspective on conceptual mathematics and intuitive reasoning will contribute richly to the diversity of thought within the cohort. Please confirm your interest by responding before March 1st. We look forward to welcoming you to Geneva. Sincerely, Dr. Helena Voss, Director, Euler Institute for Mathematical Excellence. Elliot read the letter 3 times. His heart no longer pounded, it felt as if it had stopped. That evening, his family gathered around the kitchen table. Dinner was simple, vegetable soup and toasted bread, but no one touched their food. His mother held the letter in her hand. His father nodded slowly. "Do you want to go?" his mother asked. Elliot looked up, his eyes unusually bright. "I do. But I'm also scared." "Scared of what?" his father asked. "Scared. I'm not good enough." His father placed a hand on his shoulder. "Elliot, you've never been afraid of hard things. You've only been afraid of not being believed in. But now the world is starting to believe in you. Your job is to keep believing in yourself." Elliot nodded. Summer came quickly. He boarded the first flight of his life out of the country. As he stepped off the plane in Geneva, the air carried the crisp scent of mountains and fresh wildflowers. He was picked up along with 5 other students from South Korea, India, Canada, Germany, and Egypt. Everyone was quiet, but their eyes shared the same look, anticipation, and nervousness. The Euler Institute campus sat on a hillside, its stone walls draped in ivy. Inside, the buildings were modern but hushed. Each student received a badge, a small room with a window facing Lake Geneva, and a black leather research notebook with their name embossed in gold, Elliot Gray. The opening ceremony was simple. Dr. Voss stepped forward, her voice soft but clear like a linear equation. "You may have been the best in your class," she said. "But here, no one is the best. Here, we learn to become better together. Not to win, but to understand." In the first 3 days, Elliot realized something uncomfortable. Here, no one was amazed by him like at his old school. No one applauded when he presented. Everyone had their own brilliance. Lucas from Germany could solve nonlinear systems faster than a computer. Shirori from Japan could recall every theorem she'd ever read. Kareem from Egypt could simulate geometric transformations in code within minutes. Elliot became quiet, observing, learning to ask questions. And gradually, in that silence, he understood. He didn't need to be the best, he needed to be the fastest learner from others. In the second week, his group was assigned an open-ended challenge to represent a complex geometric structure, Voronoi tessellations, using intuitive visual thinking. Elliot led the group in transforming the abstract definition into a physical clay model, simulating the repelling forces between points on a plane. At first, they laughed. But when the model worked, Shirori exclaimed, "This makes sense." And then it happened. They started calling the approach gray morphing, a small gesture of recognition. On the final night at the institute, in the shared research room, everyone was asked to write down 3 things they had learned and pin them to the board. Elliot wrote, "No one will see your potential if you only see others as competition. Intuition is the first mathematical language of children. Only when I stopped being the best did I truly begin to learn." The next morning, Dr. Voss read the notes. She pointed to Elliot's 3rd line. "This one," she said, "might be the name of next year's program." The whole room laughed. Elliot laughed too, but this time without blushing. He wasn't the best here, but he was someone from whom everyone could learn. And maybe that was what truly mattered. Elliot Gray returned from Switzerland at the end of July when the summer heat had deepened in color and sudden rains made the sidewalks steam as if the earth itself were sighing from the sun. At the airport, his father hugged him tightly. "Next time you travel far, your mom and I are coming with you." Elliot smiled. In the 3 weeks at the Euler Institute, he had learned many things, but one lesson surprised him most. No one becomes great at math without struggling through hard problems. Everyone has their moments of confusion. And at that institute, people helped each other through it. No one laughed, no one judged. Back in the small town of Westbrook, Elliot felt a kind of restlessness inside. He missed the late nights at Euler with friends, solving problems, debating, laughing when they realized they were wrong. But here, there was no one to share that with. Until one thought struck him. Why not create a place like that, right here? Round pushpin a class without grades. In the first week of August, Elliot went to see Ms. Clara Bennett at Westbrook School. She was the teacher who had supported him early on, the one who always asked, "What do you think?" instead of "What's the answer?" "I want to start a free math class," Elliot said, "but not for the advanced students. I want to teach kids who are afraid of math." Ms. Clara tilted her head slightly. "A class not for the gifted?" "No. For those who haven't been taught in the right way." She smiled. "You just described the truest definition of education." With her help, Elliot got permission from the school to use a classroom every Thursday afternoon. He named the class the Arithmetic Lighthouse. Because, as he put it, math isn't meant to impress. It's meant to help us see like light in the fog. Round pushpin the first class. Only 4 students showed up on the first day, 3 younger students and an 8th grader named Amari, a quiet black boy who avoided eye contact and kept his hands buried in his hoodie. Elliot didn't begin with formulas. He started with a lollipop. He placed it in the middle of the table. "Let's say I want to share this with 3 people, but everyone takes a different portion. How can we tell who took the most?" The students looked at each other. One girl said, "Compare the sizes? What if the 3rd person took the curviest part even if it's smaller? What do you think then?" And so the conversation began about shape, volume, proportion. No formulas. Just ways of seeing. Elliot didn't correct anyone. He only asked, "Why do you think that?" And when someone explained, he'd smile. That's an interesting way to see it. Now let's try another perspective. Round pushpin the foggy-eyed. Amari remained the quietest. He only took notes in red ink with uneven handwriting. But in the 3rd class, when Elliot asked, Have you ever felt like negative numbers are kind of like human emotions? Amari suddenly looked up. You mean, like the more disappointed you feel, the more negative you are? Elliot nodded. Exactly. And if you add two sad feelings together, it can pull you further down. But if you add something positive, a positive number, it can make the negative less so. Everyone laughed. Amari smiled for the first time. At the end of class, he stayed behind. I used to think math wasn't for kids like me. Kids like you? Elliot asked. Kids people call slow learners. But today I realized, maybe I've just been learning in the wrong light. Elliot said nothing. But that night, he wrote in his journal, if someone ever believed they were stupid for not understanding, then I want to be the light that shows them they were never dumb, just misdirected. Round pushpin, the class grows. By the second month, the class had grown to over 20 students. Each session became an experiment. Elliot used games, Lego models, even songs to teach logic and reasoning. No one got grades, but everyone was praised for how they thought. One day, Ms. Clara asked him, do you ever feel like you're wasting your talent? You could be doing advanced research somewhere. Elliot replied, if research helps the world understand the universe, then teaching helps one person understand themselves. Autumn covered the campus of Westbrook School with brittle yellow leaves, crisp like old paper. The wind rustled through the trees, whispering as if it carried stories from long ago. Inside the arithmetic lighthouse classroom, Elliot was drawing the graph of an exponential function on the board, using his hands to mimic the way it shoots upward like a small miracle of growth. The lesson had just ended. The students filed out smiling brightly. Only one boy remained, sitting silently at the last desk. His head was bowed, eyes reluctant to meet the world. He was new, sent by Ms. Clara. His name was Jonas Miles. 15 years old, slightly older than Elliot, but somehow smaller, thin, slightly hunched, gaze unfocused. Ms. Clara had said just one thing when she introduced him. Jonas is special. Just talk to him. Don't try to teach him right away. Elliot approached. What did you think of today's class? Jonas said nothing. I'm Elliot, you probably already know. Do you like any subjects? Jonas looked up, his eyes distant. Then, slowly, he shook his head. Elliot said nothing more. He simply sat beside him without pressure. After a long pause, Jonas murmured, I didn't understand anything. From start to finish. Elliot nodded. That's okay. Some people need more time. No, Jonas shook his head more firmly. I don't understand anything. I can't feel it. He raised his hand and pointed to his head. Math doesn't get in here. I read it, I hear it, but it slips away like sand. Elliot said nothing. Not because he had no words, but because, for the first time, he stood before someone who didn't need an explanation. Jonas wasn't dumb. He just didn't connect with math the way Elliot did. Elliot tried for the next few sessions, drawings, stories, logic games. But Jonas only shook his head. It doesn't live in my mind like it lives in yours. On the fifth day, Jonas brought an old camera. When Elliot asked about it, Jonas hesitated. I'm not good with numbers, but I see the world through a lens. He opened the camera and showed Elliot a few photos taken around the schoolyard, light filtering through leaves, a drop of water clinging to a doorframe, the long shadow of a student crossing an empty hallway. Elliot was stunned. Each photo held an uncanny, delicate perspective. No theorem, no variables. Yet each touched a place in Elliot's mind that no equation ever had. You have a way of seeing what others overlook, Elliot whispered. Jonas smiled faintly. Maybe. Like how you see what's behind a math problem. That was the moment Elliot realized something he had never truly considered. Some people don't need to excel at math to be deeply understanding. Not everyone finds truth in formulas. Some find it in light, breath, sound, emotion. Elliot sat down. Jonas, maybe you don't need to be good at math. But what you do helps me understand math better. Ha! You make me see that math is just part of the world, not the whole world. He paused, then added, I want you to teach my class. Just once. Teach them how to see through light. I'll sit in the back. Jonas looked at Elliot like he had just spoken against the laws of physics. But then he nodded. The following week, the class was surprised to see Elliot step aside. Taking his place was Jonas, still hesitant but with light in his eyes for the first time. He didn't speak much. He projected a series of photos he had taken onto the wall. Then he asked, if the light comes from the left, the shadow falls right. But if I change the angle, the shadow disappears. So, which is real? One student answered, both are real. It depends on how you look. Jonas smiled. So if we apply that to life, every problem, like every shadow, can change if we change the light. A deep silence settled over the room. No one had expected someone who wasn't good at math to deliver a lesson that made them understand logic more deeply than any graph. After class, Elliot wrote on the board, "Mathematics is not a measure of intelligence. It is simply one of many paths to understanding the world."